Hello friends! Today we're getting festive with this quick and easy candy cane tutorial. Let's jump right in. I will be using the Procreate app on the iPad Pro, and as usual, my canvas size is set to 3000 pixels square at 300 dpi. If the layer limits on your iPad are too low at that size, you can set your canvas to 1500 pixels square, also at 300 dpi, to get more layers. By the way, all the brushes I'll be using in this tutorial are default brushes, so they come free with Procreate, but you're welcome to use whichever brushes you prefer. First, let's turn on drawing guides. So go to the Actions menu, tap Drawing Guide, then tap Edit Drawing Guide. Use the grid size slider to increase the grid to 8 squares across, and of course it's square, so it will also be 8 squares tall. Then tap Done. Now go to the Painting section of the brush library and choose the NIKKO RULL BRUSH. I have the brush size set to 20%, but if you're working on a smaller canvas, you'll want to drop that to about 10%. The NIKKO RULL brush is nice and wide, so we're going to use it to create a rough reference sketch so that when we ink the candy cane, it will be the same width throughout. Using the grid on the drawing guide kind of like a ruler, make the reference sketch about 4.5 squares long. Now getting the curve right with one continuous line can be a little bit tricky, so start at the top with an arc, kind of like a little mini rainbow shape. Then add the long section. Then go back and finish off the hook of the candy cane. Reduce the opacity on this layer and create a new layer above. Now switch to the monoline brush and trace the shape. The trick to getting curved shapes to look nice and smooth is to actually draw the curves in sections. So start in one section and draw an arc. And if you keep your pencil down, the quick shape feature will kick in and smooth out that curve for you. When you start on the next section, make sure you overlap the last section to help create the look of a continuous curve. Then you'll also want to make the ends of the candy cane curved rather than flat. Once the shape is fully enclosed, fill it with color. Now you can turn off the reference sketch and the drawing guides. Change the background color, and by the way, if you want to use these same colors, I'll share access to this palette later in the video. Then change the color of the candy cane to white. Now let's add the stripes. Create a new layer above the white candy cane and make it a clipping mask. Switch the color to red and increase the size of the monoline brush to 100%. To help create the illusion of a rounded 3D shape, each stripe is going to have a slight curve to it. So the stripes will curve so that they're higher on the right side. As you get to the top, the stripes will then turn to follow the hook of the candy cane. Now you're going to want to space these large stripes fairly far apart, so you'll end up with about 9 or 10 stripes total. Now reduce the size of the monoline brush to 45% and draw these smaller stripes between each of the larger stripes. Reduce the brush size again, this time to about 5%, and these tiny stripes are going to fill the remaining spaces. Now swipe right on these two layers, then tap Group to group them. I'm going to name this group Candy Cane 1. Now you're going to swipe left on this group and tap Duplicate. Name this new group Candy Cane 2. Now you can uncheck this box to temporarily hide the second group. Go back to the first candy cane group and tap on this little arrow to make all the layers visible. Tap on the layer with the stripes and then tap Alpha Lock. You'll notice that the layer now has a checkerboard pattern on it to indicate that Alpha Lock is on. Alpha Lock is another way to mask a layer. So when it's on, anything you add to that layer will be confined to the shapes that have already been drawn on that layer. So this is going to be an easy way for us to add shading to just the stripes. Choose a darker shade of red and switch to the noise brush. We're going to pretend that we have a light source coming from the top left. So that means that the inside curve of the hook of the candy cane will be in shadow, so you can shade that area with the darker red. With the light coming from that direction, the right side of the candy cane will also be in shadow as it curves, so add a little shading there as well. We can apply the same shading technique to the white part of the candy cane. So go to that layer and turn on Alpha Lock. Now choose a cream color, something that will be a little darker than the white, but not too dark. Add shading to the white part of the candy cane along the same edges where you added shading to the stripes. You can also use shading to help round out the ends as well. Now we can also add a couple highlights. Tap on the stripes layer within the candy cane 1 group, then tap the plus sign to create a new layer above. Change your color to white and switch to the soft brush. I have the brush size set to 3%. Again, our light source is coming from here, so the highlights will be on the left and along the top of the hook. And then you can add a highlight on the left side of the straight section as well. As you can see, the shading and highlights really help make the drawing feel more dimensional. Now that's all done, you can flatten this group down to 1 layer. Now go to the transform icon, which is this little arrow, and make sure uniform is selected so you don't accidentally distort your shape. Now, using this little handle, tilt the candy cane to the left. Go back to the candy cane 2 group and turn that back on. Tap on the transform icon again, and this time tap flip horizontal. And then you can angle this candy cane to the right so it crosses the first one. Now open up that layer group, and we're going to add shading to this candy cane just like we did with the first one. Select the stripes layer and turn on Alpha Lock. Choose a darker red and add shading to the stripes with the noise brush. The light is still coming from the same direction, but the position of this candy cane is different, so the shading will be in slightly different places. This time the shadow will fall along the straight edge and only just a little on this underside of the hook. Then there'll be a little more shadow on the right side of the hook. Now do the same for the white areas. Turn on Alpha Lock on that layer, switch to the cream color, and add the shading. Now add a new layer on the top of that group for your highlights. This time the light will hit this back side of the hook, as well as the left side of the straight section. And a little light will probably hit this area of the hook as well. Once that's all done, you can flatten this group. Now we can add a big ribbon to finish this off and make it feel really festive. Create a new layer above the candy canes, and we're going to do a pencil sketch first, just so we get the shapes and placement right before we start inking. The knot at the center of the bow will be a square shape with rounded corners, and you want to position that right in the center where the 2 candy canes cross. To make the bow, start with 2 triangle shapes, and then make all the lines and corners more rounded. You can also add curved dents on each end of those triangle shapes to make it look more like a bow. Now draw 2 loose curved lines for the ends of the ribbon and join those with a triangle shape. If you need to make adjustments to the size and position of the ribbon, do that here on the sketch layer. Once a sketch looks the way you want it, reduce the opacity and create a new layer above. To make it easier to show you what I'm doing, I'm just going to reduce the opacity on the candy cane layers, and I'm going to ink in black. I'm going to ink the triangle shapes of the bows and the ends of the ribbon on 1 layer. Once that's done, reduce the opacity and create a new layer above. Now draw the center knot. Change the color to red, then turn the opacity back up on the other layer and change that color to red as well. Then you can turn off that sketch layer. Now we're going to add a little shading and detail to the ribbon so it doesn't look so flat. With this layer highlighted, tap on the plus sign to create a new layer above. Make the new layer a clipping mask. Choose a darker red and switch to the noise brush. Shade the inside parts of the ribbon closest to the knot. You can also add a little shading to these edges as well. Choose a red that's even darker and draw a curved line along the bottom edge of each side of the ribbon. Then fill that area with the darker red. I'm using the MONOLINE brush for this. Switch to a tapered brush like the Studio Pen and draw a few lines on either side of the knot in that same darker red. Now add a new layer above both of those ribbon layers. Choose a red that's lighter than the red you used on the knot and switch to the noise brush. I've got mine set at 8%, but you can go even smaller if you're working on a smaller size canvas. Now you can just go in and add a few highlights to the ribbon. When you're happy with the way it looks, you can select all those ribbon layers and pinch them together to merge them down to one layer. This part is optional, but I also added a few loose pine needle leaves and stars to finish it off. Feel free to put your own spin on this. You can add holly leaves and berries or maybe mistletoe leaves. It's totally up to you. Here's the final piece. And here's what it looks like with a different color background from the same palette. If you decide to try this tutorial and share it on Instagram, be sure to tag me in the image so that I can see your art and feature it. And speaking of features, here are a few artists who did a great job of recreating the Luna Moth tutorial I shared last week. And if you'd like to use the same color palette I used for this piece, you can download it for free by going to geogram.com/candycanes. If you enjoyed this tutorial, I'd love it if you'd give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.